it's good to be back out on the field the last couple of days. And obviously you guys are aware that we had their stoppage and the guys came back excited to practice. Had a good lift and meeting session today and then back to the field tomorrow. But, you know, it felt like coming out of our scrimmage, it feels like a month ago, but 10 days ago, there was a lot of excitement. And then we had to shut down with, you know, all the things going on campus. And once we got through that window and players were chomping at the bit to get back to work, it was fun for us to have that opportunity. And now obviously we're closing in 2.5 weeks from a game and excited about the announcement of our game being at 8 p.m. With Wake. So, you know, each day it's kind of one of those deals where unlike any other time for all of us, things change daily. And so not just with the COVID virus, but the contact tracing that comes, you know, not even when a kid has it. Sometimes a kid just wakes up congested and lets the trainers know. And you have to go through, you know, all the things that go with protecting these guys when they have roommates. So, you know, day in and day out, the numbers change. So you got to be creative and work with the guys that are there and Zoom call with the guys that aren't and hope that, you know, you get through it. So that's kind of where we are. If there's individual questions about player progress or the team, feel free to ask.
David Teal, you want to start us off?
Sure. Good afternoon, Coach Doeren. My name is David Teal, and I work at the Times-Dispatch newspaper up in Richmond. And we were speaking with Justin Fuente earlier today, and as you can appreciate, they have had some infections since their students began coming back to campus. And he voiced some frustration in not knowing what the benchmark will be for a team for competition. How many positives can you have and such? Do you share that frustration? When do you think you'll get an answer? And do you have any idea what that answer should be?
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of unknowns that are frustrating. You know, obviously we all want to win and we want to give our players and programs the opportunity to be successful. And there's a lot of limiting factors on a daily basis that are out of our control. And none of us as coaches like that. You know, we like to be able to limit the number of things that can cause us to lose. And so I think we all share Justin's frustrations. I don't have any answers for you because that's really not a discussion that I'm not in. You know, I'm not sure what the exact number is. There's been a lot of talk about it. I think it's more about position decimation than it is about numbers. You know, when you end up where you don't have a position group that can function, that's a bigger problem maybe than having 11 guys where it's one in every position group. You know, if you lose 7 of your 8 offensive linemen that you travel with, then you're not going to be able to play. Whereas if you lose 7 guys, 1 from each group, you are. So, I don't think there's a perfect answer to that question. But I do think that that's a frustration and a tough thing for us to deal with right now because on a daily basis, your lines can change quite a bit.
You used the word creativity in your opening. How much more cross-training are you doing with your guys?
A lot. You know, it was a conversation we had at the beginning of training camp and now it's come to life. You know, I've already talked about how we do that on the offensive line with tackles, guards, and centers, but, you know, we're doing it in the secondary where corners are learning safety positions, safeties are learning nickel. You know, our Sam linebacker has to learn will linebacker, or Mike linebacker has to learn one of the outside linebacker positions. You just have to have enough double training where you're able to sustain your depth chart, you know, as things progress. So, you know, we've done a lot of things that way. Just, I guess, so if you have the issue on game week or in the middle of game week, you're not starting from ground zero trying to train somebody for a new spot.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Lawrence Davis. Lawrence, do you have a question?
No, my hand's not raised.
Mark Armstrong, what you got?
More on the cross training, Dave. How do you liken the mental workload of having to learn multiple positions versus the physical, learning to read and react at different spots?
Well, I think it's kind of on us to pick the guys that are capable of handling that, Mark. If there's a young man that really struggles just knowing one spot, we're not going to put more than one spot on him. There's certain guys in our program that have mastered their positions mentally, and we feel like it's not a lot for them to handle. And so those are the types of players, more experienced guys that you feel like you can do that with. And, if we end up in a situation where we don't have that luxury, then that's, something we'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it. But our plan is, a guy like Thayer Thomas or Emeka, for example, they're capable of learning multiple spots. They've played a lot of football. You don't do that with a true freshman. So you're just trying to use your older guys that have played a lot, that aren't thinking a lot, and put a little bit more on their plate that way.
And you mentioned, obviously, every coach loves to be in control. This is like a different layer of helplessness, isn't it? In regards to, you have to trust your players in a normal way are behaving, but this is a whole new level of it being out of your hands.
Yeah, the only thing you do control is the fact that you don't know what's going to happen every day, right? And we've challenged each other as coaches in our building and challenged our leadership council. I think the team that handles change the best has got an upper hand right now. And so you almost have to embrace that. And if you can embrace it and daily roll with the curveballs that are coming at you and deal with them better than somebody else is and not become negative by it, because I think that's hard too. I think a lot of people focus on what they don't have instead of what they do. That's really been our focus. So here's what we have to work with today. Here's the amount of time we get. What's the best way we can use this time with the guys we have? And just go that way. And I've never been anywhere where you're planning practices by the minute. We're usually weeks out with what we want to do on the field. Can't operate that way right now. You have to really embrace what you have and do the best you can with it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jonas Pope.
Coach, you guys, of course, originally was scheduled to open at Tech, and then the schedule changed. You had to switch to Wake. What was the adjustment period like, switching your game plan from when you were focused on Tech, and then you got to scramble? Well, not really scramble, but change everything up and then focus on Wake, just like that in the blink of an eye.
Yeah, it probably isn't as bad as it would have been the other way around because we play Wake every year, so at least we have some recall on that team. If we were opening with Wake and then had to flip-flop to a team we haven't played in a long time, that would have been a little more challenging probably for our players and staff. But, we know what Wake does, and it's a matter of just adjusting how you're going to defend them or how you're going to attack them and getting back into their film. It does take a toll on you mentally as a coach. I think, you're locked in on a certain team. You put a lot of time into that, you're game planning, and then all of a sudden, snap of the finger, you got to drop that one. So, what we did is we said, all right, let's make sure we take advantage of the time we've put into Tech. So we will play them in the second game. And, let's not forget about the things that we had and write all this stuff down and document it. And then let's transition. And, having the break in the schedule at the time we got it probably wasn't a bad thing for the staff because they were able to use the time without being on the field to reallocate their time to Wake Forest.
You mentioned the break for the players. They couldn't do anything, but was that kind of like a much needed break for them mentally and physically to kind of get away from it for a little bit?
I don't think they looked at it that way. They were disappointed. They had a long break already from us, from March until when they came back. So in the way we've spaced out our camp, Jonas, it hasn't been your traditional training camp where they were worn out. We've taken a lot of time because of the amount of time we had for the first game to have our recovery that they needed and lifting. I do think the mental part was probably better for them than the physical. I think they really want to be out there training right now. But with all that's going on from we're going to play, we're not going to play, we're going to play, we're not going to play, and then all the things happening socially, there's been a lot mentally these guys have had to deal with. So that part probably was healthy for them to have a little bit of a break.
Aaron Beard, what you got?
Hey, Dave. With NC State going to online only for undergrad classes, I'm curious what kind of impact you think that might have in terms of, purely from a football standpoint, of maybe lowering the risk of an outbreak or exposure for your guys on campus interacting with students if so many have gone home. I mean, do you see that playing a big, impact and maybe lowering risk?
I think it can. Leading up to the students' return, we were really good. I mean, I think we tested for 2.5 months and had 3 positives, and then once the students came back, just like you're seeing across the country, obviously when you take 25,000 people and drop them into however many city blocks it is here, and they haven't been here, that's an influx of germs, and so what comes with that is what comes with that. And we're now having that leave. So I hope that we can return to where we were. We were doing really well. And so as we get on the backside of this thing and students are leaving our campus, you would hope that it protects the so-called bubble that we're trying to have with our guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
David Hale.
Hey there. First of all, Annabelle, that's a delightful credenza you have behind there, and I bet you're impressed that I can do the word credenza. Dave, I was wondering if you could explain in some specifics exactly how contact tracing works for you guys. So I know obviously if a guy's positive, he's positive, but how do you determine like what length of time 2 guys might have been within a certain space and who would then need to be quarantined? Has that come from medical professionals? Do you review what those numbers are routinely, and how difficult is it to kind of manage all of that?
Yeah. Well, it starts with our student health. Julie Casani is the person on our campus that oversees that area. And so as soon as we have a positive test, our head trainer has contact with her and Rob Murphy from our athletic department. And they go through the steps of what you're talking about. Who do they live with? Who have they been around? They're not only asking the trainer, but then they communicate that with the student athlete. And then anybody that is in that contact tracing is then quarantined. And that's a 14-day quarantine. So that's really the biggest challenge is for every, if you have 4 people that live together, for every 1 positive, you're losing 4 players. And in our case, a lot of times only one of them is sick. And so there's a lot of people that come out of your workforce every time that happens. The bigger problem probably has been there's so many symptoms, as you guys know, that people look at that are symptomatic to this. And so we live in a pretty allergy popular place, I guess you would say. And so our guys can wake up with allergy type symptoms, which are also similar. And now they're going to be pulled out until we can test them along with their roommates until they can come back clean. And so, day to day, you can feel like you're going to have, 3/4 of your guys and end up with half of them. And then the next day they come back. So it's challenging. I think the contact tracing part of this has been the most, I don't know if frustrating is the word, but the hardest part, because these kids want to be out there and they're being told they can't, and they feel completely healthy, and in some cases are, but that's the safest thing for them. And so we're following the CDC guidelines and medical advisory board's suggestions. And as a coach, I can't do anything about it. We don't get the right of veto in this one, David. So you just stand by and they tell you what to do, and then we support them and move forward with who we have.
Does the bulk of the contact tracing contact is, I'm assuming, coming away from the field, not during practice and stuff like that? And then just out of curiosity, is that, I think the CDC guidelines are, within 6 feet for 15 plus minutes. If you're actually playing on the field and you're breathing and sweating on each other, is that different than just like if you and me having a conversation within 6 feet of each other?
Well, I think the difference on a field or on a court is, you watch these athletes, they're not around each other. As you add the seconds up on the field, they're not around each other very long. I mean, in a 2-hour practice, a guy could be around each other maybe for 3 minutes total. I mean, you're in and out of contact. Plays only last 6 seconds. And so you might be around a player for 1 second on a play, whereas you could ride in a car with me for 15 minutes and we're done. So the game and the practice hasn't been the issue. It's been what happens in a roommate scenario or in a dining scenario or in a car ride scenario that is getting a lot of the contact tracing positives.
Mike Toper.
Afternoon, Coach. Good to see you.
Hey, Mike.
Quick question, really mostly about kind of conditioning. I spoke with Mike Houston over at East Carolina, and they were in a similar situation. They had a scrimmage, then they were forced to shut down for a period of time. When you guys got back this week, did you need to kind of take a few steps back, while you hadn't been together, or were you able to kind of pick up because it wasn't, that long of a time?
Yeah, no, we did. We came back and we first day out, we're just in our helmets, and our strength staff had the guys that morning as well. So we got a good workout, got a good sweat in that way with them, and then went out on the field for about an hour. And normally this time of year, your practices would be much longer than that, but again, you don't want to come out of an 8-day layoff and then just crush it in one day. And then got a bunch of guys with soft tissue injuries, so you have to kind of look at it from a long-term perspective. Each day we add a little bit back. We do some position-specific conditioning at the end of practice with guys and trying to get their cardio back to where it was.
Let's see. Gibby, what you got?
Yeah, Coach, do you have a player or two who's kind of taken the leadership role and saying, guys, we got to do this. We got to do this right if we want to play football? And if so, who are those guys, and what type of a job do you feel they're doing, Coach?
I think our team has done a nice job with each other, holding each other accountable to the right and the left. And there's a lot of leadership on this football team. That's one of the things that makes it a fun team to be around. And I think position by position, you guys kind of know who they are. But it's the older players, the guys that are in their final year that really want to have a great season and go out on a right note, that you see speaking up and holding guys to a place where they can play because they're not putting each other at risk.
Thanks, Coach.
Yep.
Brett Friedlander.
Dave, you've already addressed, preparations for a specific opponent and also the conditioning and all, but how much does being away 8 days from practice this close to the start of a season, how much does that set you guys back?
It's a setback. It is. I mean, we were making good progress. We had our first full contact play since the spring, and then you have to step away. And football is a game of repetition. You can't create the winning habits you want without repetition. And you lead up to those with maximum reps. It takes stacked days for guys to learn how to get muscle memory in their fundamentals. And then to take an 8-day break, it's a setback. And it's longer than that for some of these guys. They've been out for 14 days because they're quarantined, so everyone's going to deal with that part of this thing, and there isn't a fix. I mean, just when you get them back, you do the best you can to try to get them acclimated and back into the muscle memory and the repetitions that they need.
And then I've got a position-specific question along those same lines. When it comes to developing a backup quarterback to Devin, how much has this kind of made it more difficult? Because you've got two guys who've never taken a snap in a game that are battling for that position.
Yeah, it's challenging. We can't practice with the same number of guys just because of what we're dealing with. So your practices are set up differently. I think Coach Beck's had to be really creative. But it's every position's that way. You're trying to have depth. I think depth is going to be probably one of the biggest storylines of the year, to be honest, is how teams sustain these losses they're going to have to guys being removed from their roster. And now it could be game day that you lose your quarterback, because we're testing them on Fridays.
Is there a specific pecking order yet behind Devin?
Bailey Hawkman's our second quarterback right now, and then it'd be Ben Finley.
Andrea Adelson.
Dave, I'm just wondering how you would address, what initially happened with the team. There's some other coaches who've gone through this who said they felt the need to go over the protocols and reiterate that all over again with the players, and that some of the players may be viewed it as a reality check when they had gone through something like this. So I'm just wondering how you dealt with it when you had to talk to the players about it.
We've had a lot of team meetings leading up to our scrimmage. After that, as things were starting to pile up, we had a team Zoom, because we weren't allowed to meet in person at that point in time, just to talk about what was going on and how they could handle it the best they could. Obviously, at that point, we were learning that campus was going to be going all online and students were going to be leaving. And so it's just a day-to-day, and then each day we're together. It's a Q&A thing too. The guys do a good job. They'll text me at night like, "Hey, coach, can you talk to the team about this?" Some of the guys are asking, like, people want to know about their fans or their families being able to come to games. And there's a lot of information we're still learning day to day, Andrea, so it's trying to be as transparent as I can. Like I tell them, like, I don't know the answers, but I'll try to get them, and just ask. And so that's almost every day you're trying to update them on where this is headed, because obviously there's no script.
Jonas.
Coach, I have two questions. The first one, we haven't talked to you since the scrimmage, and you said you felt pretty good coming out of the scrimmage. So can you kind of tell us who kind of stood out, who jumped off the page in the scrimmage you guys had the Saturday before last?
The best part of the scrimmage was how it went back and forth. Sometimes you get in these scrimmages and the offenses will dominate or the defenses will dominate. There was back and forth in the deal. And so the defense, would create a takeaway. Drake Thomas had a really nice fumble, forced fumble that he had. Then the next drive, the offense scored. And so they responded. And then the defense came back and had a stop. And so it was a really good back and forth day. That part was a lot of fun to see. It felt like a year ago now, so I need to go back and think about the big plays so I can help you. Ricky Person had a nice day for us out there. I think continues to show us some things. Our Raheem Ashford, safety that transferred in here, had a really good day defensively. Had a lot of nice tackles, a big pass breakup, and interception. And so he did some nice things in the scrimmage that day as well. But it was really good just to get in there and see the guys play. It's been so long. And as a coach, it's hard to feel good after a scrimmage because one side of the ball inevitably lets you down. But that was what felt good about that day. We came out of it healthy, and there was a lot of back and forth production.
And my second question is, throughout the summer and the offseason, guys on your team, well, guys across college football everywhere, but specifically guys on your team, have spoken out about things that are going on across the country with social injustice and protests and things like that. And you've been supportive of those guys. But there have been some people on social media, fans who've like not argued with those guys, but disagreed with them and said so on social media. And some of your guys have shown frustration or just responded. Have you talked to them about that? Or is there something they talk about amongst themselves about, are they frustrated again hearing fans talk or disagree with them or talk to them directly on social media about them speaking out?
Well, first, I'm proud of our guys, and I'm obviously very sensitive to their pain. And so I let them talk to me about those things. We have great conversations. I have talked to them about focusing on the positive things that you're doing. I think at times we get caught up in some of the negativity that's out there and lose sight of the positive things that we are doing. I know that Isaiah and Pack United and the guys on our team have done a lot of really good things to impact change, not just in our locker room, but around them. And then you lose sight of it because somebody's being negative. And, I think for every conversation you have, some people are going to get a lot out of it and some people aren't. And you got to choose who you want to focus on at that point. And for them, I just keep counseling them not to be frustrated, not to lose sight of the positive things that they are doing, that there is growth and there is empathy. But there's always going to be people that don't want to grow, and you can't let them impact, the platform that you have or make you want to quit because of that. And I think just, trying to continue to embrace my ability to support them and love them and help them through this and show them that there is positive things happening. And I think a lot of times we all focus on what we don't have instead of what we do. And these are great young men, and I stand with them and will continue to, and there are going to be people that disagree with us out there. That's the world we live in, and you have to understand that.
Mark Armstrong.
Dave, you used some general terms early on about roster management, said like one day you'll have 3/4 of your guys, the next day half. Has that been an actual reality where half of your roster is out sometimes?
Yeah, and it's not because they're out because we have all of them positive COVID, I mean, like I said, it's quarantining that gets a lot of the guys. So, it's a real number. And sometimes it's the dorm got us early, when the campus had all the guys, or students back in the dorms. A lot of the dorm guys got quarantined. And so that's a lot of players. That's 33 guys that live in that dorm. And so it's a big chunk of people. But yeah, I mean, there's days where that happens. And so you focus on the ones that can be there and you try to help the ones that can't mentally through the Zoom ability to teach. And right now we're gaining a lot more back than we're losing. So that's a good thing.
And a completely unrelated follow-up. A lot of Pack fans kind of laughed yesterday that of all the years to get primetime games, it's when there can't be fans in Carter Finley. Did you have that same reaction?
Yeah, I mean, it made me chuckle, I mean, we usually have a noon game to start the season. And everyone goes crazy about it. And now we have an 8 o'clock game. No one can be there. So that's okay, But I know our players were excited to have that opportunity.
Mike Toper.
Hey, Coach, I know there's a little bit of time there before you're for Wake Forest there. Will you guys have another scrimmage? And if so, are there 1 or 2 areas in particular that you're looking to see, positive growth, that sort of thing?
We would like to, yeah. I mean, the biggest thing we need to do is get the situational stuff going. The red zone, short yardage, goal line, 2-minute, things like that you need scrimmage type environments to really see the outcome. So the situational football is an area that, we would really like to get, even if it's thud, but just get a lot more reps of that leading up to our first opportunity.
Do you know if you'll be able to to schedule a scrimmage beforehand, or that's still up in the air?
Everything's day to day, Mike. I mean, there's days you'd like to do it, but it's going to come down to, do we have the right number of guys to make that a good practice?